Welcome to CEO Corner. My name is Sarah McGrath, partner in 360 Search Recruitment Services across Ireland and the UK, and I have a particular interest in understanding the psychology of success and those in leadership roles. I'd like to introduce Dalton Phillips, CEO of Dublin Airport Authority. Dalton started his career with Jardine Matheson with roles in Australia, New Zealand and Spain. He then spent 7 years with the popular American retailer Walmart with roles in Brazil and also in Germany, before joining the Weston Group and becoming the CEO of the Brian Thomas Group. He then spent time in Canada and became the COO of a leading Canadian retailer, Loblaw. From there, he spent 5 years with Morrisons plc as their CEO, where he had 600 stores and responsibility for 120,000 staff that were servicing 12.5 million customers each week. Today, Dalton is the CEO of Dublin Airport Authority Group and also a board member of ACI Europe. Dalton's educational background is extremely impressive. He holds a BA from UCD, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and is an honorary doctorate in business management from Bradford University. And not only that, Dalton speaks fluent Portuguese and Spanish, and to top it all off, he holds a private pilot's license. I'm delighted to have Dalton with us today to share his insights on building your career and leadership. So Dalton, you've been the CEO of the DAA for over 3 years now. So at what point in your career did you know that this was the level you wanted to reach?
I'm not sure I ever said, look, I want to be a CEO. I've always just tried to work hard. I've enjoyed responsibility. And I think opportunities come and you get more and more comfortable with doing different types of roles. And I've been a CEO, I think I've got about 15 years experience now being a CEO. I feel comfortable in it. So when the opportunity came to take this role, be back in Ireland, a combination of aviation, which I love, and retail, because DAA has both, I jumped at it.
Good. And what was involved in getting to this level? Because no doubt you spent many years kind of figuring it out and you know, making steps to get here.
A lot of hard work as you build your career. I started in the retail sector, so I did a graduate program, and then I became, I joined a retail organization on a management training program, but they very much threw me in at the bottom, and you know, worked in a fish department and a bakery department and a produce department. Just worked my way up, and I think, look, hard work and putting your hand up and always taking the opportunities that are there and going for them. Great. I think doors open and some doors close.
So it's putting yourself out there, really, definitely.
Look, I think you need to work hard, and there's no substitute for putting the hours in. I think you've got to be looking for those opportunities in your workplace, and they're always there. Everybody's stretched, so at an early stage in your career, you're putting your hand up. I remember, you know, when I was in the retail sector, very early on in my first year, and I would do my full week's work, and then I used to say to my boss, look, if there's any work at the weekend, call me, like I'll come in. And you know, there was no such thing as overtime or extra pay. It was free. And I kept saying every Saturday, like in retail, to run the supermarket on a Saturday, to be sort of the duty manager on a Saturday in a supermarket, it's because that's when all the business is. Yeah. And I kept saying, please come and let me work the Saturdays as the duty manager. And one day somebody was sick and I got the call, and I was in within 15 minutes, you know. And so I think it's always about trying to go that extra mile.
Good. And stepping into the CEO role, what sort of challenges did you face when you are a successor and you take the role from a previous CEO?
So I think it's really important when you take any role, whether it's becoming the CEO or any role in your career, more often than not, unless you're an entrepreneur, you're stepping into a role that somebody else has been doing. And I think it's really important to recognize that everybody's different, everybody does things differently, and the person who was in that seat before you may have done some things that you would do totally differently, but some of the stuff they were doing was really great. I think too often we hear people and we see people go into new roles and they discredit what was done before. And I think it's a terrible habit that people sometimes have. We stand, I always say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. It's the people who did the role before. So in my particular case, as I joined DAA, there was a very successful CEO before me. He did things one way, I might do things slightly different. So it's really about assimilating, well, what was he doing that's absolutely brilliant? I might even be able to learn from and inherit some of those customs and practices. And then what are things that I'm going to do differently? But I think you have to get in there, you have to listen and open your eyes and really understand what's going on before you're quick to give comments. I think particularly as a CEO, because everybody's looking at you all the time. In your new period, they're studying your body language inside out. Everything that is presented to you, how you look and react, people are going, oh, he did like it or she didn't like it. And so you have to be really careful as you join.
And at the moment, I know there's with the pandemic and how companies are feeling during this time, the DAA and the aviation industry are, those that have suffered among the worst. How have the last 10 months been for you?
So in our particular sector, it's been devastating, and there's been huge sacrifices. And our business, for example, would lose €1 million every single day. It has lost €1 million every day since sort of March last year. So it's difficult, and we've had to really adjust our business. So we've had to say goodbye to a huge amount of people. 1,000 people left our business internationally. 1,000 people have left our business here in Ireland. So a third of our workforce has had to leave as we've had to rapidly downsize. And huge sacrifices for our people. So everybody has taken somewhere between a 20 and a 40% pay cut since March of last year, or since when the pandemic really kicked in. So it's been really hard for people, and we've had to get through that, and we are getting through that, and we're ambitious for the future, but obviously we've been tainted by what we've experienced over the last year.
Yeah, like in a lot of industries, it's just such a different experience. Some industries are actually performing, like technology, and there's other areas like pharma as well, and then you have the complete opposite side where there's redundancies and pay cuts, and everybody's feeling it's devastating for people and for people running businesses. I have no doubt that you've had to make some extremely difficult decisions over the last 12 months. Can you maybe talk me through what is your leadership style or maybe your leadership approach in handling these sensitive issues?
Well, I think that the last year has been really interesting because none of us have any experience in leading through a pandemic. And so I don't have a huge amount of aviation experience. I'm relatively new to the sector, and others on the team might have a huge amount of experience in the aviation sector, but we're all dealing with the same sort of white sheet in front of us because there is no playbook. So I think it's been really important through this pandemic to lead by really trying to listen and hear from different views, because nobody really knows, and you've really kind of got to distill down. In my particular case, I work with a very strong senior management team, and it's been very important to keep, I think consensus can be good and consensus can be bad. So there are times when organizations are paralyzed by consensus, they never make decisions. But I would like to think that we've had a good balance of trying to get consensus around these key decisions. I mean, where do you forecast the business for the full year? What sort of downsizing do you need to do? How do you downsize? And things like that are really hard to do. And I certainly don't feel that I would have had all the answers myself. It's about working with the team. And in fact, if I look through all the major decisions we've made, actually, as a team, we got to cabinet responsibility on all of them quickly. And some decisions need to be made very fast. So in March, we had to move like at lightning speed. we are government owned, but that's as far as it goes. We have no support from the government at all. We are a fully commercial organization with a fully independent board. So we had to move at lightning speed. But other decisions we've had to really be more considered on. And I think in general, you've got to bring your team with you. And I've been very fortunate that as a team, we've worked well together. We've made the calls, and history will judge, Sarah, whether we've made the right calls.
Yeah, and I think, taking support and taking advice from people that are around you, that's certainly how we have ourselves survived through this. The DAA runs on passenger business, as do airlines and concessionaires. How do you, Dalton, run a business when the one thing you rely on is barely there, or is in peaks and troughs?
Well, it's very difficult. We are an essential service. We see ourselves as an essential service, so we've got to keep the airports running. We operate in 14 different countries around the world, so we felt that we need to be operational, but we're totally dependent on passengers flying. Therefore, we have a very close relationship with the airlines, but in turn, they're dependent on what government regulations are going on, and we've seen all sorts of border openings and closings going on over the last year. So it's about trying to work very collaboratively. Traditionally, in the aviation sector, airports and airlines are like cats and dogs.
Okay.
And there's a lot of mudslinging. But actually, in the last year, it's really brought us much closer together. We're very fortunate in Ireland because we have two very successful home-based carriers in Ryanair and Aer Lingus, and we've all worked a lot closer, and I think the trust levels have built. But we're all it's an ecosystem. They can't operate with us. We can't operate without them. We also need all the other ancillary services. So. Communication.
Yeah, so one positive then, the relationships are a little stronger to come out of this.
Definitely.
Good. And on a personal level, you are leading a company and going through some difficult decision making and difficult challenges. How do you manage yourself, your mental health and your physical health?
So there's obviously a responsibility in your role, and you've got to do it well, and I think you've got to look after yourself. And so I would be very disciplined around sleeping, exercise and eating, and you have to have the resilience for the journey, and you have to be there, be on all the time. But to do that, you have to look after yourself. So I would be very focused on getting my exercise and getting my sleep. And I've got my youngest child's 13 years of age. There's an ongoing joke at home because I would always go to bed before everybody else. I mean, it wouldn't even, but I am the first to go to bed, and my 13-year-old is probably the last to go to bed. But you have to look at this, and these roles, and whether you're a CEO or it doesn't really matter where you are in an organization, you have to protect yourself. And I think one of the really good things that's coming out of the pandemic is mental health, in the sense of the discussion is now so much more on the table. We're discussing it like we never discussed it before, certainly in our business, and how to manage that resilience, and it's critical or you won't get through it.
And I think the stigma about mental health has gone as well. You see it in the media, it's conversations in work, it's conversations at home. It's definitely a step forward and somewhere we need to be. Do you have any advice for other leaders or anybody in the workforce that is facing challenges similar to the DAA and challenges that you're facing?
Well, there's so much support out there. Many companies have different providers or people inside who can help with these issues, and so often people don't know about them, or they're nervous about picking up the phone. And I think you've got to we all manage our physical health, like most of us are very conscious, whether we're actually acting on our thoughts or not. We all know that physical health is key, but mental health is just as key. So I say to people, talk about it, be aware about it. But there are steps we need to put in place. I mean, if you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not exercising, you're going to put yourself under additional pressure. And that's pressure you don't need in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. And Dalton, you're profile is extremely impressive. You've spent a lot of time on your education. You know, it's clear the hard work and the dedication. You speak 2 languages. You hold a private pilot's license. Where does that drive come from?
Well, I've always been more comfortable doing more things than less, and
sitting idle.
Yeah, I'm probably more productive when I've got more on. But I must say, I got a real shock when I left university back at the beginning of the 90s, and the unemployment rate was 18%. Wow. And I kind of always, my parents were terrific, brilliant parents who'd really encouraged me all the way through my childhood, but I kind of did think that it was all just going to happen. Like I would come out of university and it would all just sort of happen. And life's not like that. And 18% unemployment, and I think I wrote 50 CVs out back in the day.
You're a pro at CV writing.
I'm a pro at CV writing. And then it suddenly dawned on me, actually, this is going to be a little bit harder. And I got my first job, and I really just worked my tail off from then on. But I think you've got to work hard, or it's going to be difficult.
And the hunger needs to be there as well, which is, you know, clear it was from an early age, writing 50 CVs. I know sometimes I struggle to get people to write 1 CV. So I do a lot of work with people who are building their careers and, you know, work in large companies, and they don't necessarily know, or they come to me for advice, you know, how do you get noticed? Like, what are my next steps and what are my options? Do you have advice for people working in large companies that want to be noticed, that are ambitious and want to achieve?
So it's a hard one, that. I think the first thing is, if you work in a large company, that's great, because there's lots of opportunities in large companies. And we often think if we're in a smaller company, it's easy to be noticed. It is easy to be noticed in a smaller company, but in a larger company, there is just by definition more opportunities. So it's about taking those opportunities. And I think it's important to be good at your job and have a clear assessment of, are you performing in your role, and what are the skill gaps you may have in your current role? And I think often people aren't clinical in sort of diagnosing how they're performing. So you need to have honest conversations with your peers, and particularly who you work for. And often it's hard working for somebody, for them to give you direct feedback on where your gaps are. So you've got to be intelligent about how you try and seek that feedback. So first of all is figure out, do you have a skills gap? And you may, and that's fine. It's not the end of the world, but work on that. I think build your network internally is important. It's much better to do good work, though, than focus all your time on your network internally. And I do see people who spend their time trying to get noticed, and I think, well, that's good, but you've got to back it up with good work. Yeah. And I would say, don't get over anxious by it. Do really good work. Keep putting your hand up. I always say to people, volunteer for everything. Volunteer for everything. You know, there's a project going on. You've heard it's going on down the corridor. Go down there and say, look, I've got a bit of extra capacity at the end of the day. Can I help? Just be one of those people who puts their hands up for work and go for it.
That's great advice. And do you have any standout moments or obstacles that you faced that people potentially could relate to, you know, along your path of building your career?
Oh, I think you have loads of bumps along the way. And actually, the older you get, and now I'm sort of getting, I'm not old, but I'm sort of getting more miles under my belt. I'm more conscious now when I meet people who have not had any banana skins. And I think it's particularly dangerous if you're in your sort of mid-40s and beyond and you haven't had a banana skin. And I think that's a real danger area, because you start to feel comfortable in yourself and you think, actually, everything I do is working out great, and you're in the absolute danger zone. So I think it's always good to have a few slip-ups, because you learn from that. I certainly have had a couple of major moments in my life. I remember once when I was in my mid-20s, and my career was going really well, and I was moved from Australia to Spain, and everything that I was doing was really working out well. And I got moved to Spain, and I was kind of this golden boy coming through. I was about 28 on the going through, and I got to Spain, and the CEO said, I don't care what your reputation is, what your CV is, da-da-di-da-di-da. You're not coming to do the job you thought you were coming to do. I've been transferred between this multinational. We're going to stick you in another job. And he stuck me in a very, very difficult job, a job that I had not signed up for, that I had no plans to do. In fact, it was to run a supermarket. I was sort of doing well in my career. He put me down to run this small supermarket that was sandwiched between two massive hypermarkets on the outskirts of Madrid. I had no chance. I had no staff. It was till 9 o'clock every night. I spent all Saturday on the checkout because we didn't have enough checkout operators. But he was testing me and he said, I don't care who you are, you're going there. And I had to suck it up. I said nothing. I got on with it. And about, 3 to 4 months later, I suddenly got a call out of the blue and boom, he pulled me right back up.
Wow.
But I was being tested.
Wow.
And I think you're going to get tested along the way. So when I left Morrison's, I had a difficult period there for a period of time. You get tested, it builds resilience, you're stronger for it.
Wow, I love that story. That's great. And as a leader, how have you continued to scale yourself and improve as you go?
Well, I think that's really hard. And I think it's a discipline in the same way that sleeping and eating and running is a discipline. I think you've got to continue sharpening the saw, as people say. And I think that's hard because actually our inbox is so full. So I think you do need to read and keep current, but that is hard because we just don't have a lot of time. I think you've got to keep listening and asking people. And I love this idea of sort of reverse mentoring that people talk about, which is getting closer to people who are a lot younger than you, who can share their experiences. We've got all these millennials coming through, and you've got to be challenged by them because they see the world so totally differently. So you've got to continue trying to keep learning as you move forward, but it is hard because we don't have a lot of time.
And I think as well, constructive feedback. Sometimes you don't want to hear things, but they could do the world a good. It could really actually benefit your skills and how you perform. And as somebody running a business, a leader or a CEO or a senior person inside of a company, what sort of characteristics do you think will make somebody strong in that role? And if they don't have them now, can they be learned?
Yeah, so I think sort of fundamentally there's this sort of the IQ and there's the EQ. And the IQ, I call it IQ, but it's sort of a lot of the key functional skills necessary that allow you to sort of process information. But it's not just the what you do, it's the how, which is why the EQ is so important, and it's how you work with people. And I think the softer skills, as you build your career, become more and more important because actually you have less, ironically, you have less and less control the higher you get in an organization because actually it's the team that are working with you and the teams that work for them that are actually doing a lot of the work. So it's about how you are engaging people and influencing people. And I always say in our work, look, nobody's more important than anybody else in the organization. Not the CEO's not more important than the person who's just started in the organization. It's just some have different levels of responsibility, but we all play a key role. So I think you've got to have strong skills, but it's about how do you engage and empower and encourage and move the organization forward, particularly in a service industry, which is essentially what we are. We're a B2C business, really.
Yeah, great. And what goals do you have and what are your ambitions for the GAA for 2021?
Look, we're trying to recover our business. As I said, a third of our staff have had to go. Yeah. Our losses are enormous. Our net debt has doubled. We're in a very difficult position. We've got to rebuild our business. And I'm reminded of that story of Lisbon, which in 1755, Lisbon, the great city that we all know in Ireland because we travel a lot to Portugal, and it was devastated, absolutely devastated by a tsunami, and then it had fires for a month, and they rebuilt that city brick by brick, and today it's a reimagined, repurposed city that's better than it was before. And I think the DAA is a brilliant business, but we're going to have to reimagine and rebuild and reconnect Ireland to the rest of the world. And we've got 14 different countries we operate in, from Canada and the Bahamas down to New Zealand, and all those businesses need to be brought back up. But how can we reinvent ourselves to be even stronger than before? And I think that's really encouraging. There are reasons to believe, and we've been through 9/11, we've been through the great financial crash, and we will get through this pandemic.
Well, I feel motivated after hearing that, so thank you. So just to wrap up the interview, we've got some light-hearted questions that we ask our CEOs. So to start with, what was the last book that you read?
I've just finished John Mark Comer's book. What was it? I've literally just finished it. Oh my goodness, I've just had a brain freeze. But it's all about hurry and about eliminating hurry in your life, and how to try and calm yourself down. So it's John Mark Comer, The Irrefutable Something of Hurry. It's a brilliant book.
Okay, so you recommend it?
Very much so.
Great. And who do you admire in the world the most, and why?
Oh, my mother.
Fantastic. Good answer.
My mother, she is 80. She just had her hip redone. We climbed Carrig, which is a mountain near where I live in Wicklow, last week. 15 kilometers we did.
Wow.
Scrambled up to the top. I mean, she's kept her career going. She's got a brilliant mind, and she had 5 children, and we're all best friends with each other.
Great.
So look, I have to admire her first.
Her job
and
is
foremost.
done. She's done a job well.
No, she's still totally in charge.
Well, okay. And if you were stuck in a desert island, what 3 items would you bring?
I would bring my iPad.
Yeah.
I would bring my running shoes, and I'd bring my Bible. So my faith is important to me.
Oh, good. And last question, what advice do you have for those who are building their career but they're not quite there yet?
Don't get too anxious. People get so anxious about they're not where they need to be.
It's true.
Dominate in your role, seek feedback as you were talking about, and put your hand up for things that are going on. You don't know, from the smallest little thing that might be going on in your company, that could turn into something enormous. So put your hand up, be enthusiastic, move forward, and work your ass off.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much, Dalton. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.